you said Carter earlier. Carter's very good at sort of haranguing people, and I've been on many panels with him before, and he always sort of a man of darkness, but also a man of reason and a man of ambition at the same time. It's a very unique cocktail that only Carter can pull off. I would be my optimism stems from a couple of perspectives. I mean, you're right, Carter. We have to have a market for these kinds of solutions, which is predictable, which is measurable, and which is long term. And when you look at watershed protection of certain urban areas, New York City and the Catskills watershed is a very, very famous area where money flows from urban users of water to upstream stakeholders. And San Francisco, Portland, Boston, and Seattle have a version of it. Some kind of financial mechanism which takes money from downstream and deploys it upstream. And it works, it's popular, it's anecdotally very well accepted, but no one knows whether it actually works financially. And it's been years now. It's been about a decade here, and it's been similarly long in the other areas. And we're, at TNC, we've set up 32 water funds in Latin America. Some are compliance, other are voluntary. And it's all very spiritually attractive, but actually we haven't succeeded in measuring the financial performance of these things. So I think if we went back and maybe retroactively measured what it actually has done in those 5 cities and some of these Latin American cities, and we're doing that, by the way, then we could actually point to an economic value proposition for green infrastructure, in this case watershed protection measures, which would replace water treatment plants and other gray areas, gray measures which are much more widespread. The other thing I would say is that we shouldn't be, you're right, we shouldn't be incremental. But at the same time, the gray-green is going to be a portfolio solution. It's not binary. It's not levee versus oyster reef. It's not wetland versus a wall. It's going to be both. And if there's nearly zero of dollars being deployed toward green outcomes currently in urban centers all over the world, if we succeed to make it 10, 15, 20% over the next 10, 15 years, I think that's a big deal right there. So it sounds kind of not ambitious and perhaps partial, but I think we would fall on our sword if we went too strong and if we said, well, forget gray, it's all green. It doesn't work that way. It's got to be both. Perhaps if there's time, I don't want to hog too much time here, but we're doing some great work in Philadelphia with something called NatLab, National Infrastructure Financing Laboratory with ECHO Asset Management Partners. Jason Scott is somewhere here. I think I saw him. We're taking urban vacant lots and converting them into and taking them making them into green gardens. Stormwater runoff capturing areas, and that's also very, very economically viable and very, very, very interesting, and it's vastly replicable.
Thanks very much, Peter. I'm particularly keen that you mentioned the value of ecosystem services. The economics of ecosystems, biodiversity. It's a really clever thing where we put value. This is how we take a stab at, what's the value of the Catskills? What's the value of bees? How do we value nature? And I think that could be part of our method. It's been around for a while now. Pavan Sukhdev is the man who invented that. I interviewed him at the Zurich TBLI, and these are great, clever initiatives, but I wonder how many people really know about it. And Carter, sorry to keep you waiting.
Just 2 comments. One is that one of the major things that can be done about climate change is urban densification. Cities are far more energy efficient than non-cities. And the trend toward more cities, China's going to move another 250 million people into cities in the foreseeable future, is largely a good thing, particularly in places like China where a lot of the infrastructure will be newer and they're getting tougher on regulation. So it's a good thing. To the extent that we citify or densify, we've taken a step forward. On ecosystem services, I very much agree there's a lot to be done there. If you look at the carbon abatement curve, typically protecting tropical forests is under $10 a ton, and addressing coal-emitting power plants is truthfully probably north of $60 a ton. So one of the most cost-effective things we can do is to stop tearing down 14 million hectares of tropical forests a year. So one of the things that we did a few years ago was what we call an EVN EVW exercise for Guyana down in South America, which has a primordial forest about the size of Great Britain. We calculated the economic value to the nation of harvesting the forest and opening up the lands to farming, ranching, and gold mining versus the economic value to the world of maintaining the forest as an ecosystem service. And what happens, as you, I'm sure, would expect, is that forests are worth much more dead than alive in a short-term basis. As a matter of fact, the history of America, when America was developing, we cut down our forests and converted the lands to farming. Again, the short-term bias in the human brain and human institutions is at work. So if we could figure out a way to pay countries like Guyana the opportunity cost of cutting down their forests, so they wouldn't cut their forests down, we would take a big step forward. Norway and Germany and Denmark to a lesser extent, but Norway leading, set up a fund using funds raised out of North Sea oil exploration. They didn't want those funds to get in and pollute their economy, so they segregated them. And they were going to use them for basically protecting wild places in Indonesia, Brazil, and places like Guyana. I must say, very little of that money has flowed. They flowed it into the World Bank, which is a slow cycle institution, to say the least, and very little of that money has actually flowed through. So the net incentive in places like Panama and Guyana and Venezuela and so forth is still to cut down the forests as quickly as possible, convert them to higher value, process the wood, and then send the wood over to China with its enormous demand. But the short-term bias is destroying world forests, and ecosystem services is a nice concept, but in the end, it's an economic issue.
Thanks very much, Carter. And this EVN, EVW is something, it's exciting business for people like me who are non-financial experts, because I look at natural capital, canopy capital, and I see how it works in the UK, where we put a load of money recently into Ecuador. If you remember, British government investing in Ecuador to stop deforestation project. So I love the way we can value it. Well, we've got about 15 minutes. We've got enough material here to go on for the rest of our lives, but I want to offer the opportunity to the floor. If you've got burning questions, comments, insights, meaningful opinions, or anything, we would like it, please. There's a hand up somewhere. Yes. Sorry, it's funny, I can see you in the mirror, but I couldn't see you there. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Mike Van Patten with Mission Market.
Number one.
Mike Van Patten, Mission Markets. A question I have for anyone on the panel is, how has the challenges with the carbon markets hurt other ecosystem services, making them less attractive to direct investment? So wetlands, conservation, finance in general, habitat, and so forth.
Anyway, a fantastic question, because it does seem to be a real mess. This global carbon trading, wow, it seemed like a great idea. It got people focused. There was a sense of enthusiasm about it, and it's a muddle at the moment. We don't need a muddle. We need a more laser-focused approach to help us all with the narrative. So what do we do now?
Well, I think that this whole thing is mostly a political matter. I know that in being approached by politicians who are wanting to get my support, I ask them two questions. One question is, do you believe in evolution? And the second question is, do you believe in man-made global warming? And depending upon the answer to those two questions, then we go on to something else. But unless they give satisfactory answers, then nothing will be accomplished. We need to change the whole political system into one that will have people elected to office that support the kinds of things that we're interested in at ESG.
That's a great answer, but just before we get more, next time you have that conversation, bring me in with my knuckles dragging on. We can speak about the evolution. Any other comments? Yes, sorry, Carson.
Well, I think the truth is we really haven't tried carbon markets at scale. This is a complex problem, and if you look at Kyoto, you ended up with a negotiated outcome where there were a lot of complexities and harsh choices made in trying to get support. The Waxman-Markey bill, which I think took 1,400 pages, It was a classic case of the triumph of complexity over simplicity. We have a carbon market now, cap and trade, going on in California, but it's been around for less than 6 months. It has some prospect of proving effective. What's happened in the European trading scheme is basically caused by flaws in the Kyoto process. So carbon markets, certain voluntary carbon markets really don't exist. In Waxman-Markey, again, the coal industry put so many exceptions in there to protect long-dated assets that became an improvement for coal. So, poor